VikesNow. I am Tyler Ireland. With me today is Leighton Glodek from Strictly Football LLC and Saivion Mixson from the Vikings Wire. Fellas, how are we doing today?
Doing good. Doing good.
Doing
Uh,
phenomenal, boss.
awesome to hear. Awesome to hear. Uh, Today we're going to talk a little bit about the Senior Bowl and Shrine Bowl. Now that both of those are wrapped up, we can kind of get into some of the prospects that impressed us. So, Leighton, I'm going to start with you, get right into it here. Who is your first player from the Senior Bowl that really caught your attention?
Yeah, my first player is Spencer Rattler from South Carolina, quarterback, who actually won MVP of the game. He finished 4 for 4 passing with 65 yards and a touchdown on 2 drives. I think he is definitely a project in the NFL. This kid was the number 1 quarterback in high school, one of the most sought after recruits, going back several years. I mean, this kid was like a can't miss prospect coming out of high school to where I still think that that carries with you going into the NFL because obviously he was kind of put in a not a tough situation in Oklahoma, but he was on a short leash for sure because they knew they had Caleb Williams right behind him. And, as soon as Spencer Rattler wasn't meeting the expectations of those Oklahoma fans, they knew 5-star Caleb Williams was right behind him. So they're like, all right, put him in. Him, like, hence leading him to transfer to South Carolina, where he actually had some big wins in his time there. I think he played really good ball, and I think just him balling out in the Senior Bowl just kind of proved that he's still got some of that raw talent in him. He's definitely a day 2 pick for sure. Um, but I mean, day 2 pick, why not? Why not see what you can get with with a low risk quarterback? It's and I would look at, I mean, if you're going to take a Jaron Hall in the 5th round, why not take, if you don't take your guy in earlier rounds, why not take a Spencer Rattler? I feel like Spencer Rattler has a way higher ceiling than Jaron Hall would ever have, just because of what he was able to accomplish at the high school level and playing in the SEC for several years. So
So, hypothetically speaking, if the Vikings were to select Rattler, is this someone who you could see stepping in from day one to start right away? Or is this more of a, we brought Kirk Cousins back for another year or two, here's a shot in the dark at, like a mid-round prospect? Like, how do you see that going?
I I definitely don't see him as a day 1 impact for sure. It's either two scenarios would be, yeah, you bring back Kirk Cousins, you bring him in because maybe you couldn't trade up to the top 3 to get your guy, and you don't really like any of the other ones that are going in the first and second round. So you take a shot on Spencer Rattler, work him out, see how he does. Maybe he's the backup, maybe he's the third string, but you never know with a guy like that. Second, maybe you do get your guy in the top 3 or the top, first round. You trade back into the first round, get a guy, you trade into the top 3, you get a quarterback, and maybe you draft him in the 5th round if you're moving on from Kirk, because you are going to need depth at that position to where, maybe he really falls down people's boards and you can get him for really, really cheap to where maybe he can be your backup or your third string, or you hang on to him for a little bit just to see what happens. I mean, maybe he balls out in the preseason and people are willing to pay something for him. So I think there's a couple different routes. I definitely don't think he's a day 1 starter in the NFL right now. But I definitely think he could get to a level to where he could start some NFL games.
Yeah, and Kirk Cousins was a fourth round pick himself too, and that was the same draft where Washington selected RG3 in the first round. So if the Vikings want to double dip at quarterback, that might not be the worst idea. It's probably a
Right.
bit more unpopular because, you want to get as much positional value as possible, so you kind of spread the wealth a little bit in regards to the draft. But if you really like Rattler and just sort of the value proposition there, might not be a bad idea. If you went, say, JJ McCarthy, Spencer Rattler, or Michael Penix Jr., or you trade it up. I mean, God forbid. Guess if you trade up, you wouldn't want to take another quarterback in that same draft.
No.
But yeah, it's certainly an option on the table there to draft two in one draft, or you just bring back Kirk and draft a guy in the mid round again, let him compete with Jaron Hall. For me personally, someone who stood out was Braden Fisk from Florida State, defensive tackle. You know, he's the first guy ever to be traded prior to a Senior Bowl game, which I thought was kind of funny, I guess, due to roster attrition. He was practicing with, I believe it was the American team, played for the national team. I could have that swapped up, but he made an immediate impact. He had 4 tackles, 1.5 of which were tackles for loss, 1 pressure, half a sack. You know, for a roster that was kind of short at that 3 tech spot, I feel like he made the most of his opportunity. And what was really interesting with him is he's not the most like he doesn't have the measurables that teams are typically looking for at that position. You know, they want tall, long guys who can, fill those gaps or whatever. But, he's a bit shorter, he's a bit quicker. So maybe you look at him as more of a rotational type of player on, passing down to put him in there and hope his quickness can help generate pressure. Um, so I'm not sure how well he would fit in with the Vikings because on one hand you have Flores who, sends a ton of pressure, but he's just a smaller guy. So if we're running a 3-4 base defense, where can you really slot him in? But I thought he was one player who really helped his draft stock at the Senior Bowl. Um, so that
Where is
would be
his
my
draft
pick.
stock at right now?
I think he's going to be a day 2 guy, but just based on like production. But it wouldn't shock me if he was like early day 3, just because teams will look at the measurables and say, he's capped out as a rotational guy. Like
Right.
that's my concern with him. It's like kind of what Kenny Willekes was, but granted, Willekes was more of an edge rusher, where hey, he's got the production, he's showing out at Senior Bowl, but is he really a full-time guy? Is the question with Braden Fisk. But so far, he's, doing everything he can to at least, get his name up there, which is good. And I'll head to Saivion here. Saivion, who is your first pick for the Senior Bowl? One player from the Senior Bowl who really stood out to you.
For the Senior Bowl, my first pick is somebody that I'm pretty sure most people will know. It's UCLA edge Leighton Latu. Um, I mean, he came in as probably the top prospect in the Senior Bowl at the time, and I'm almost positive that he left the exact same way. I mean, he proved everything he needed to prove. He showed that he has that pass rushing bag, the bend around the edge. He looked the part of a prototypical edge at the next level. And he's got this argument to be maybe the best defender, even like period, maybe even outside of Jared Verse or Dallas Turner. They might be the first ones off the board. He's been mocked to the Vikings plenty of times, especially with the uncertainty at the edge position. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I don't believe Minnesota has an edge except for Patrick Jones. Patrick Jones is on contract, but I think besides Patrick Jones, I don't know if there's anybody else on contract right now. But he just caught my eye because he checked all the boxes. I mean, he checked all the boxes. I don't think he played in the actual Senior Bowl. I think he kind of took his hiatus afterwards after the practices. But you know, I'm going to keep my eye on him this pre-draft process just to see if maybe the Vikings pull the trigger on him. I know his medicals are a problem because he had to like literally medically retire at one point. But yeah, I'm just going to keep my eye on him, make sure to see like if they do pull the trigger on that.
It'd be
Yeah,
nice to replace a 6'5", 250-pound edge
Yeah,
rusher, Daniil Hunter, with a 6'5", 250-pound edge rusher.
why not? You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? I mean, and the thing is, I mean, if we do, I mean, I keep saying I keep doing that. If the Vikings do end up uh bringing in Hunter again, keeping Hunter, why not bring that other guy in, especially on a rookie contract? I mean, that's a steal because, quite honestly, he really could be the best edge rusher in this class. So
yeah,
it just
yeah.
makes sense.
I'd bring them both back, and if you're not going to bring back Hunter, replace him right away with a guy that you think could be the exact same type. I think that'd definitely be ideal. And if you sign Hunter, maybe things don't go as planned, the first however many weeks of the season, and then if you sign Hunter, you can at least maybe get rid of him for something to where and
Yep.
just not letting him walk. So I think there's a couple different options, but yeah, he definitely stood out for me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, should be noted that Daniil Hunter, DJ Wanham, and Marcus Davenport, who did absolutely nothing this season despite the guaranteed money, are all set to be free agents this offseason. So edge rusher is going to continue to be a huge need for the Vikings heading up into the draft. Leighton, I'm going to go back to you here. Who is your second player from the Senior Bowl that really caught your attention?
Yeah, my second guy is Amani Bailey, TCU running back. He had the first 5 touches for the American team. He showed great ability to break defenders down in open space. Really, he just kind of reminds me of a yak guy. Like he's kind of a scat back. Put him in there on third down, 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6. He's a guy I'd be comfortable throwing to behind the line to gain and let him kind of do his work, especially if it's man coverage and he's working on a linebacker or something. I definitely think he'd be a guy to fill that kind of void that the Vikings have right now. Ty Chandler was getting more of like the first, second, even some third down reps too, but it feels like Ty Chandler is going to be more of that first, second down guy. Maybe bring in maybe a free agent to block on third down. But, I feel like that's why we have CJ Ham to where we kind of need one of those scat backs if we don't bring back Cam Akers off of his torn Achilles. He put up some great numbers at TCU as well. He had over 1,200 yards and 8 touchdowns last year. So all around good performance from him. And I think him getting the first 5 touches for the American team kind of it makes me think that he showed himself, showed his value in practice throughout the week to where the coaches felt comfortable giving him the rock early and often. So
It's interesting too because you say, hey, the Vikings should use CJ Ham, on third downs and pass protection, right? But they're not utilizing the fullbacks a ton. So,
right.
Ham, the only fullback on our roster, he's not really being used. So maybe you do need another running back in there who can provide some level of pass protection, but also be a bit more of a receiving weapon than Alexander Madison is able to on third downs. So Amani Bailey could be a guy to watch right there. Um, for me, my second player from the Senior Bowl is Cedric Gray, linebacker from North Carolina. Really strong showing at the game. Team high 7 tackles, 2 broken up passes, both were nearly intercepted. He's a rangy, athletic linebacker. If I had to give him a comparison of just like as far as Vikings players are concerned, I think like Brian Asamoah wouldn't be a bad one. You're just looking at kind of like an undersized guy who he might not be the best as far as getting off blocks to go at the quarterback. Not saying he's not capable of doing that, but it's an area of improvement that he needs to work on. But with Troy Dye, being a free agent this offseason, you're probably not going to bring him back. So if you're just looking for some added depth at linebacker, he could be an option. So Cedric Gray, North Carolina linebacker, is the other player I have my eye on. Saivion, how about you? Your second player.
Second player is kind of in the same vein as Brayton Fisk. I don't know if we're going to be able to. I keep saying we. I don't know if the Vikings are going to be able to get him, but he definitely will be on my radar. Cornerback Jarvis Brownlee from Louisville. Guy is electric. I mean, he is a physical cornerback, loves to get his hands dirty. I mean, has the most aggressive punch in his jams. I'm pretty sure he put at least 2 or 3 receivers on their butts trying to get into their routes. I mean, he he shows that he's smart too, can recognize the play. I kind of did a little bit of a write up on him, a little bit of a film review on him for Vikings Wire. He is just a physical guy that enjoys making plays, enjoys getting dirty. And I mean, he might not be there by the time the Vikings pick after the second round, because I don't know if pick 43 is you risk that because he is undersized. He would more than likely slot in as like a nickel, kind of a nickel cornerback in the next level, but he has the versatility to play outside. So if you want to take that chance at 43, it's a definite risk, but he's definitely a round 3 guy. And if he slips into day 3, I say 100% take that chance.
Yeah, anytime you can get value in the draft, that's always a good thing. So it's definitely something to monitor is, there's always good football players that will just slide down draft boards simply because of, measurables or things out of their control, like, injury
Right.
reports. And, that's where you can get some good value in the draft is just taking good, solid football players. The analytics people won't love it necessarily because, you look at like the RAS scores or whatever, and it's like, oh, he's not an insane athlete, but just get guys who can play. I feel like that's a good rule of thumb. Now we're going to kind of switch gears here, talk a bit about the East-West Shrine Bowl. Two players that impressed you and why. Leighton, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I'm going back to another running back, Frank Gore Jr. Name probably sounds familiar. The son of the NFL legend, Frank Gore. He won Offensive MVP for Team West. He had a 49-yard touchdown run, and then he finished the game with 87 yards on 6 carries. He had a very all-around showing, showed his great vision, and then just when he hits the open field, he's able to make guys miss. And he's got that breakaway speed that you need in the NFL. I mean, it seemed like he had a lot of one-on-one matchups with linebackers in the hole, and he made a guy miss, and he was able to score, especially on that 49-yard touchdown that he had on, I think it was like the first drive of the game for Team West. He had 1,100 yards and 13 touchdowns last season, and he's been mocked in the 6th and 7th rounds right now. And I think that would be a excellent pickup on a 6th, 7th round pick. These guys usually aren't making the team anyway, to where if you're in need of a running back depth, I definitely think he's worth a shot. He's not as bulky as his dad was, um, but he does have kind of that same build. And I think with a couple years, if he really wanted to get into that form, he definitely could. But he runs, moves just like his dad did. When he was atop of the league for several years. And I just really liked what he put on in that game. And then I went back and watched some games at Southern Miss, and he looked really explosive. So I think it's definitely a round 6 or 7 pick that the Vikings might have some interest in.
The Vikings have had success, with drafting running backs in general, but especially in later rounds. You look at Ty Chandler, who was a late round pick in day 3. And I'm still really high on Dwayne McBride. I know he was, practice squad stash all year, but I believe he led all of college football in like yards and yards per carry and all these different stats, which stats aren't everything, but generally if you lead college football in an entire category, that can't be a bad sign. Frank Gore Jr., if you can get him in day 3, you know, that's just great value to me. You're maybe he's not the same exact player as his dad was, but I think he can provide, all sorts of value there as well. So, that's wasn't he named MVP of the Shrine Bowl, I believe?
Yeah. Offensive
Yeah.
MVP for Team West, yeah. I think his stock is going to rise. He's going to the combine in a couple weeks here, and I think once his name gets out there a little bit more and they see his measurables, I think if he scores even just decent at the combine and he's in a mix with some other guys, I think his stock is going to rise. I think he could get to fifth round maybe. But yet again, running backs really aren't going that high anymore in the NFL. So
Right. It'd be crazy if the Niners picked him too. Just completely
that would
off
be crazy.
topic, but it'd be cool. Uh, my first player from the East-West Shrine Bowl is wide receiver Anthony Gould from Oregon State. 5'8", 165 pounds, really, really undersized. It's not exactly someone who has like that, traditional NFL build that teams are looking for, but he returned a punt for 80 yards and a touchdown, and what was the East's only touchdown of the day. So the way I look at this is if the Vikings are letting KJ Osborne leave, they're going to have Jalen Naylor and then Brandon Powell probably compete for that wide receiver three spot. And you're going to need sort of that wide receiver five who can provide some sort of value on special teams as like a return guy. And I think that's where Gould could sort of slot in and make an impact and make that final 53-man roster. Otherwise, you could stash him on the practice squad too. It wouldn't surprise me. But he's a late day three guy, potentially undrafted just because of the build. Like, I don't think a team's going to go out of their way to draft him in like the fourth or fifth round. But, you know, he played well at the Shrine Bowl, and he helped his draft stock. So his, maybe he does get drafted in the seventh round. We will see. Saivion, I'll go to you next. Who is your first player who impressed you from the East West Shrine Bowl?
First player for me from the East West Shrine Bowl, defensive tackle Miles Murphy, not Miles Murphy from Clemson, Miles Murphy from North Carolina. Um, Big physical defensive lineman in the middle. I saw him in a couple of one-on-ones and practices. And I mean, he kind of stood out to me as just another guy with like really strong hands, used a lot of bull rush, pretty good in run stopping. Not much of a pass. What is it? Not much of a pass rusher, but I mean, he has run stopping ability, and given the fact that down on the defensive line, that's another question. Possibly losing guys like Sheldon Day or can't remember who the other person is that is on. Yeah, Sheldon Day is on contract or not on contract. So just with the uncertainty there, getting another guy that can stop the run, another guy that can clog up holes down there, just makes sense to me.
So he's not a huge like pass rushing upside guy, but you think he's someone who can come in and, be provide immediate value.
I think he can stop the run pretty well. I think he can yeah, he doesn't really give you much as a pass rusher, but he's a strong guy, really can get into the pads of an offensive lineman, stuff up some running lanes. So yeah, I think that's where you probably will want him, at least first year.
Oh yeah, for sure. Leighton, how about you? Second player and why?
Yeah, second player was Jarius Monroe, cornerback from Tulane. He had an interception in the game. And what really caught my eyes in the post-game interview he kind of talked about how he was able to bait the quarterback into throwing it. That really stood out to me because I think if you're already in college, thinking about those small things about how to bait quarterbacks and the making throws, recognizing coverages or recognizing what the quarterback might be thinking in certain coverages is really important in the NFL. And I think him being able to diagnose that in a Senior Bowl off a quarterback he's probably never watched film for or anything like that is really impressive. And he had a good year at Tulane, 3 interceptions, and he had 13 pass breakups last year as well. So another really solid guy that could definitely contribute to that cornerback room for the Vikings.
Yeah, my second player here is Tua's younger brother, Taulia, I believe it's pronounced Tagovailoa, quarterback from Maryland. He showed off sort of that similar accuracy that Tua has, but what makes him stand out from his brother is that he can actually use his legs a little bit to escape pressure. He's probably not someone the Vikings would target simply because this is more of a day two, day three kind of guy, kind of with Rattler, but I feel like Rattler is going to get picked before Tagovailoa here. But I thought he really helped his draft stock over the course of the East West Shrine Bowl. Saivion, how about you?
Last guy's a bit unorthodox. His name is Cam Little. He's a kicker out of Arkansas. Um, Listen, I don't know how much longer we have with Greg Joseph. So might as well get a guy that hasn't missed an extra point since he's been in college. I saw that he has pretty good mechanics that I mean, it's a very, very relaxed type of a windup, and he's got a ton of leg behind it. I think his long this season was 56. So, you know, I don't know how much longer Greg Joseph will be able to be the kicker for Vikings. So just a name that I thought would put good throw out there.
I
Yeah, he
want to
was
get a
good.
consensus here real quick on Greg Joseph. What's your confidence level in him? Leighton, I'll start
On a
with
scale
you
of 1 to
here.
10,
Or yeah, Savion, I'll start with you here, but just yeah, scale of 1 to 10, like how confident are you in Greg Joseph as like the kicker for the Vikings?
6.5.
Yeah, I was gonna say 6.5, 7.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's made some big kicks. It always seems like the kicks that don't really matter. It feels like he's missing. It feels like it's just like the first, second quarter kicks, field goals
Yep.
that are just that they add up in the end, but at the same time, like I feel like I mean, 2 years ago, not last season, but the season before, it felt like he was making every game-winning kick we needed him to make. So
Yep.
he's made some huge kicks, but at the same time, it's those misses add up. So
It's the routine stuff that drives you crazy because he'll go out there, he'll miss an extra point, and then he'll nail a 60-yarder, and you're
yeah,
sitting there just completely confused. Because usually it's like, you have a guy who can make, you know, 45 yards, 50 yards, but anything beyond that, it's like dicey.
right.
Greg Joseph, it's almost like the opposite. He will nail long kicks in practice, and you'll be like, wow, holy crap, he's really good. And then he'll just miss the most routine stuff, and it drives me bonkers. But
Yeah.
one
Well,
guy I
and
miss is Kai Forbath.
yeah,
That
he
guy
was
was
good
clutch
too.
for us.
Savion and I were talking too, and I think something Greg Joseph doesn't get enough credit for is that he doesn't when he misses, he tends to always bounce back in the same
Yep.
game and make a big kick to where it seems like some of these kickers, they get the yips for a game to where if they miss their first one, it feels like they're cooked the rest of the game and they're going to miss 3 or 4 more to where Greg usually if he misses one early, he's able to bounce back and hit some big ones late in the game.
Mm-hmm. 100%. 100%.
And with that Greg Joseph discussion, we have concluded today's episode of Vikes Now. Fellas, real quick, where can we find your work?
Yeah, just at Strictly Leighton or Strictly Football on all platforms.
At Mixson at MIXSONS_NFL on Twitter.
And you can find my writing, of course, at the Daily Norseman as well. Fellas, thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you next week.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Appreciate it.